Welcome back to Introduction to Critical Sports Studies, ETHN 3024. Today we are examining race, ethnicity, and sports. It's important for us to have an understanding about race in society, ethnicity, and difference because where else is someone going to learn this? I've often had this conversation with students when I taught at the University of Wisconsin. A course titled Foundations of Ethnic Studies was one of several choices for a diversity requirement that a student could fulfill. I had students in the class say, well, why do I have to learn this? I already know what race is. And when I ask that question, it always comes down to biology, which is false. The understanding of race and ethnicity is one of a social construction. You will see this, if you read about this for today, you will see this in videos as well, and hopefully this will become much more clear to you all. But no one would say that they already understand economics, therefore they don't need an economics course just because they can balance a checkbook, and just because our family, our friends, and the social worlds that we live in have created these understandings of what we believe to understand is race, does not mean a student could not benefit from a course in race and ethnicity at the college level. The challenges created by racial and ethnic diversity are among the most important ones that we face as we live, work, and play together in the 21st century. So the definition of race: a population of people who are believed to be naturally or biologically distinct from other populations. Race depends on a classification system through which meanings are given to particular physical traits. Ethnicity: a cultural heritage that people use to identify as a particular population. I would identify as ethnically Mexican in my background. An ethnic population: a category of people regarded as socially distinct because they share a way of life, a collective history, a sense of themselves and people. When I talk about ethnicity in a larger class on Foundations of Ethnic Studies, I'd like us to know the difference between ethnic category and ethnic group. Because once again, these are socially constructed words and ideas and have meanings that have been created by society. An ethnic category might be Latino, but an ethnic group might be someone within that ethnic category. Puerto Rican, Cuban, Mexican. They're all going to be unique from each other, but part of this collective category of Latino. Ethnic minority: a socially identified population that suffers disadvantages due to systematic discrimination and has a strong sense of social togetherness based on a shared experience of past and current discrimination. Now, creating race: the origins of an ideology. As I stated, that this is a socially constructed idea, that race is something we have socially constructed over the past really recent 200 years. Racial classification systems were developed as white Europeans explored and colonized the globe and found that there were physical differences between people. The systems that were used to justify colonization, conversion, and even slavery and genocide. Race also, according to these systems, white skin was the standard, and dark skin was associated with intellectual inferiority and slow development. A racial ideology: as we've discussed earlier in the semester, that there will be several ideologies we'll examine, from gender, ableist ideology, to racial ideology. Interrelated ideas and beliefs that are widely used to classify human beings in categories assumed to be biological and related to attributes such as intelligence, temperament, and physical ability. Racial ideology has been used by white people historically to give themselves moral permission to colonize and to exploit dark-skinned people without guilt. Define dark-skinned people as the white man's burden, in need of moral salvation and civilizing. Once again, that word civilization being a socially constructed term. Racial ideology in the United States: well, between the 17th and 20th centuries, a person's humanity and moral worth came to be associated with skin color because, 1, white Americans needed justification for political expansion, the westward expansion of the United States, and the decimation of Native culture and Native Americans. white Americans sought to control blacks after the abolition of slavery, thus creating these socially constructed ideas of inferiority once freedmen were no longer slaves. Scientists claim to have proof of the natural inferiority of, quote, colored people and the natural superiority of people with Caucasian ancestry. In the United States, whiteness became a foundation for an American identity and a prerequisite for citizenship. Now, important terms to understand when examining race and racial ideology is that racial ideologies tend to support the following. They support racism, attitudes, actions, and policies based on the belief that people in one racial category are inherently superior to people in one or more other categories. That is a racist idea or thought. Discrimination, an action that prohibits someone from full inclusion or causes harm, either physical or psychological. An example of this, the best way I think to break this down in simplified terms, is that racism is the thought that leads to discrimination, which is an action or a response. Racial ideologies tend to support stereotypes, personally constructed beliefs of a group based on a few experiences with a member of that group or no experience with a member of that group at all. An example I like to bring into the classroom, a non-racial or ethnic category, but one that has to do with college professors. Students, after their first semester in college, have this idea that they create this stereotype of their college professors. Before they enter that room, a student may already think or know exactly what that professor is going to be like. He or she will most likely be completely engrossed in their research, in their own topic, and with little concern of other disciplines, regardless of the size of this university. Well, I like to think that I accept my peers and all of the research they are conducting in various fields, but once again, I do find the research that I do quite important. However, these stereotypes aren't always true and can lead to this opinion being made by someone that you've never met. Racial ideologies tend to support also selective perception, to note cases that confirm stereotyping while overlooking examples that contradict them. An example of this might be a stereotype related to, say, undocumented immigrants and Latinos in the United States. A person may see someone in line at the checkout counter paying in nothing but cash, and they're assuming that that person maybe is working under the table, not receiving a paycheck, thus not maybe even paying taxes. That's based on very little experience, social interaction with that person. And while they're looking at that person and already creating this the stereotypical belief, they're ignoring the possibility that this person could be a wealthy business person, a small business owner, a doctor or a lawyer. And the other people shopping in that same store, maybe of Latino descent, completely overlooking them, focusing only on this one person that might be reinforcing a stereotype that they believe. So selective perception is that idea of focusing on someone based on a stereotypical belief while ignoring the millions of examples that would break down that stereotype and that misconception. And also, racial ideologies tend to support genocide, the systematic destruction of an identifiable population. The problem with race and racial ideology: research shows that race is not a valid biological concept because external traits are not linked with patterns of internal difference. Race is a social construction that is based on social definitions and meanings that people give to physical traits. When you watch the video, Race, the Power of an Illusion, this will put this in more scientific terms with a biological experiment that happens in a classroom. Racial classification systems vary by culture and over time, and they are based on arbitrary distinctions related to continuous physical traits. I like to use the example of Tiger Woods, who disrupts the dominant racial ideology. I am Kablanazim, Caucasian, black, Indian, Asian. Race and racial ideology in sports. Well, racial ideology encourages people to see sport performance in racialized terms. For example, in terms of skin color. Use whiteness as a taken-for-granted standard in sports. Explain the success or failure of people with dark skin in racial terms. And do research designed to, quote, discover racial differences. For example, searching for the jumping genes. This search is misleading because it is based on oversimplified ideas about genes and how they work. It mistakenly assumes that jumping is a simple physical activity related to one single gene or interrelated to a set of genes. And it ignores that jumping is a cultural performance as well as a physical act. The racially natural athlete, question mark. There's no evidence showing that skin color is related to physical traits that are essential for athletic excellence across sports or in any particular sport. So, research summary on the topic, genetic factors in athletic performance. Are there genetic differences between individuals? Well, yes. Are genetic characteristics related to athletic excellence? Yes. Could one gene account for success across a range of different sports? Probably not. Are skin color genes and physical performance genes systematically connected? No. Are physical development and the expression of skills in sports related to cultural definitions of skin color and race? Yes, this is created. And do cultural ideas about skin color and race influence the interpretation of and meaning given to the movement of achievements of athletes? Yes. So, traditional racial ideology used in sports, the achievement of black athletes are based on biology, natural abilities, and genetics. This is the traditional racial ideology. This is not something that we would believe today. But historically, in the 20th century, as black athletes started to participate in sports, prior to the 20th century, very much limited in sport participation. But throughout the 20th century, as black athletes start to participate and start to do well, you would even read this in newspapers, sports columns, and even listen to this on the radio or watching sporting news, that the athlete had natural abilities or it was their genetic heritage that allowed black athletes to achieve. Whereas the achievement of white athletes are based on character, culture, organization. A good example of this is when you listen to, even as recent as the late 1990s, sports broadcasters talking about quarterbacks, for example. Quarterbacks were largely white athletes in professional football. It wasn't until, I believe, 2001 that the first black athlete was drafted as for a position as quarterback. There was a predecessor in 2001 where a quarterback for the team, the Washington football team, actually eventually achieved that status as quarterback. But it's 2001 where we have the first draft of black quarterbacks. Traditionally, the sport was limited exclusively to white males because that was seen as a leadership position. Character, culture, organization, skill, intelligence, all of these things attributed to white athletes, and in particular white football players, whereas when we started to see the emergence of black quarterbacks, oftentimes the media, the sports media, you would hear them say, it is because of his natural ability that he's able to take this position. You can see how insulting that is, that one athlete seen as superior intellectually, and another, it must be a natural trait, thus even diminishing the hard work that goes into that athlete's routine. The power of racial ideology. Well, black male students often have a difficult time shaking athletic identity labels that are based on prevailing racial ideologies in the United States. Young people are from all racial backgrounds, make choices influenced by racial ideology. And 3, in everyday life, racial ideology is integrally linked to ideas about gender and social class. Sport participation among African Americans. Well, the facts show that prior to the 1950s, sports in the United States were racially segregated, from the college level to the professional levels. African American participation in a very limited range of sports, and African Americans are clearly underrepresented in most sports today. They're not, quote, taking over sports, as some believe. Rather, they're finally fully participating. Now, identity theft in sports. Using stereotypes of Native Americans as a basis for team names, logos, and mascots is a form of bigotry and identity theft, regardless of the intentions of those who do it. Are there any conditions under which a group or organization could use the cultural or religious images of others for their own purposes in sport? What if a school named its teams the Olympians and used the Olympic five-ring logo as their logo? What if Native American high school teams called itself the Slave Masters and used Thomas Jefferson as a mascot? There's no purpose and no clear understanding why one group would then use another human being as their mascot in any way that this could be used in positive context. For example here, pick your pennant. One is being used and it has the most demeaning nickname. Looking up all these, you can read through that. None of those exist with the exception of the Washington, quote, Redskins football team. As European professional soccer has become more racially diverse, expressions of racism have become more common. Today, there are programs designed to discourage racism. Success has been spotty, though. Making sports inclusive is a major challenge regardless of nation and culture. The Irish Football Association in Northern Ireland has made concerted attempts to eliminate racism and related forms of bigotry from sports. Sports may bring people together, but this does not occur automatically, nor does it make race and ethnicity irrelevant in sports. Bringing people together doesn't lead to positive outcomes without strategies based on an awareness of racial and ethnic relations. Those changes require regular and direct confrontation of racial and ethnic issues by people in positions of power, a new vocabulary for dealing with new forms of racial and ethnic diversity in our lives, and training sessions for management and players dealing with practical problems and issues, not just feelings.